is Amogha Natha, and I got invited. Ryan and I have been friends for God knows how long. I don't want to admit based on my age. And so I wrote my master's thesis at the Wharton School in family office governance. And so on that basis, he sort of wanted me to speak, and also based on the fact that I've been advising GPs, LPs, and family offices for some time now, and had my own businesses and so forth. Grew up in a family business. I'm descended from the Surya Vansha in India. It's one of the royal families in India. So I kind of have that upbringing as well that shapes my thinking of this Sanātana Dharma moral approach. The ontology comes from there in my mind a lot, but I also study Western philosophy and so on. So especially when I work on the ethics of AI, that really is shaping my thinking. And I've spoken at the Future of Humanity conference, given a talk recently to given an interview to Forbes recently, and so I've sorry, maybe mic, yeah. Yeah, okay. We'll use the mic. Um, so he was mentioning about the family office advisory. I don't have much time for advisory stuff right now, just based on everything I'm doing. And there's a little bit of time, but not much. But what I'd like to speak about today is how fundamentally the startup ecosystem, especially related to investments, has been changed because of agentic AI, right? Because nowadays you see it where whether it's investment decision making, the way you can build apps, the speed at building apps, the difficulty in finding moats, it's very, very different than a year, 2 years, 3 years ago. I mean, this is, I would say, more of a groundbreaking shift to the technology ecosystem than, when Amazon and all these players were coming into the marketplace, because we're not just disrupting the internet, we're disrupting all of society. Right. And so just speaking a little bit about that. So what I'm seeing is there's this expression, showing up to a gunfight with a knife, right? If you are not using agentic systems, whether it's in coding, whether it's in investment selection and due diligence processes and so on right now, and other people are, they're eating your lunch. We have to be real about this now, right? So I'm seeing that very much so. So you've got some old GPs, old lawyers. Like I have some lawyers, for instance, my Swiss lawyer, he was going to bring a new junior partner in, and they ended up just putting AI systems in instead. Right. And then I've got some of my lawyers in the States, and they're a little bit older and a little bit slower to adapt. And you see your bills and how long they take to do things. And you're like, okay, come on, guys, you know, and you see that across everything, whether it's financial due diligence, whether it's the way you start a company. And it's changing things very fundamentally, because you used to need, pre-seed, seed, then you go to Series A and so forth. And I'm seeing a lot of my friends who have had successful exits, run businesses, have a bit of capital, they've got some friends, and just without even going outside of themselves and or their inner network, they don't need money at the pre-seed stage, and sometimes not even at the seed stage, right? So it's really changing things, and then they're getting to revenue sometimes, if they know what they're doing, a lot faster, a lot faster. So it's fundamentally disrupting the way we think about investments, and you're seeing companies bypass venture capital altogether, right? Which is a great opportunity for family offices, because relationships matter more now than ever, right? Now that the power is moving to good founders, you see that they want to work with people that share their values. This is what I'm seeing. It's not about running around from VC to VC and saying, who can I get money from? It's about, who do I know? Who do I trust? Who do I like, on both sides of the equation, which is great. So on one side, you see this, rapid technical development, but on the other side, you see the balancing point of, no, now that we have this rapid technological development, we want to humanize it. And that's, so there's this extreme in the AI world where you have, on one hand, people, the fear, you see these Waymo cars getting burned and AI engineers' tires getting slashed. And on the other hand, you have this great hope of, we're going to come into Star Trek era, right? Very fast. And whether we go one way or the other has to do with the moral frameworks we employ when we build, develop, and run these systems. And to me, that's not just government's job. That's the job of the investors, the founders, the people building the systems, right? And so I think the human element is even more relevant today than it was previously, because you've got this great multiplier from these systems. one small ripple in the pond is causing waves. So
there's a lot of love hate feeling simultaneously because of AI. There is both love and hate. Um, it's like the boyfriend girlfriend meeting for the first couple of dates. Now you feel something great's going to happen, but you also are afraid of how it's going to turn out. Yeah. Interestingly, I'm a professor for AI, so whatever you're speaking kind of resonates very much with me. And I'm also run a small accelerator. Um, you mentioned about responsible AI. Could you elaborate a little bit more how to make AI more responsible? Right now, it's just a tool and technology, right?
yeah. So the system that I'm employing, I've been working sort of in stealth for a long time and still somewhat. But what I've been looking at is building new types of models based not so much on transformers, but more active inference and adding additional optimization terms for moral outcome. And so in my case, I'm using the framework of Sanātana Dharma, like I said, because in our system, we already have discussions going back thousands of years of artificial beings and how their moral framework should be. When you look at the Western canon of philosophy and morals and ethics, there's no discussion, right? So for us, this is not a new topic, right? So when we look at it, we look at the concept of swadharma, what is the right thing for that individual to do? Now, if you're building systems, then you have a moral responsibility for the way that system will behave, much in the way a parent does for a child, right? Or if you're an owner of a pet, right? If your dog goes and eats your neighbor's chickens, it's your fault, right? Partially. So in the same way, when you have the system itself, as we move towards sentient AI, there's a lot of talk about AGI and super intelligence and all these things. But the real moral issue is if we start to build systems which are self-reflective, aware, grow, learn, and can self-propagate and replicate, that's a sentient being.
Excellent point. I actually work with law firms. Law firms usually don't adopt technology that fast. Um, um, Currently, we were able to close over six clients, six law firms. Um, one of the client was very, very skeptical. They wanted to use AI, but they kind of scared because it does a lot of hallucination. You ask something, it gives you something else. And law firms cannot operate based on hallucination. It has to be deterministic. So AI by itself is probabilistic. How to move from probabilistic to deterministic? One of the method that we deployed was very similar to what you mentioned, very sanatanic, very dharmic, very caring. So we basically said, you know what, we'll build a AI baby for you, and this baby is going to initially make mistakes, and then within 2 months or so we'll have it in the simulated environment. You help it nurture it, grow, and make it into a teenager. Again, there'll be some mistakes, but it'll be able to run and be active and get stuff done. AI agents, and beyond that is into the agentic AI, and add a little bit of empathy and whatever level of empathy is required. With that, you will teach that baby. And then we were able, and that worked. It took 3 months, but they were able to ultimately see it. And in fact, I have carrying the check in my pocket when I received a check yesterday in the mailbox. So it's a very satisfying experience if you add empathy to that whole process. So I'm 100% aligned with what you are.
Totally. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And are you using a mixture of experts model or how are you building it?
So currently, what we're doing is we are using CAG, which is the advanced form of RAG, and basically based on knowledge graph, and create guardrails and add having responsible AI, empathetic AI, and all of that is prerequisites built before even the training. It basically goes through the rules engine first, and then picks up data sets relevant, even for calculating fee schedule. And we are working with New York. For no fault, New York, New Jersey, no fault zone. You cannot calculate the fee to be paid by the insurance wrongly. Even $1, 1 cent, if it's wrong, insurance companies are actually using AI to deny claims. So we have to be very deterministic in the process while being responsible in terms of what the ask is. So the insurance companies also feel these are very reasonable, they're accurate, and they're very reasonable in their asks.
There was a question. Oh, okay. Sure. Okay. So we'll keep the questions shorter. That was great. Thank you. And congratulations. So just a few more things to come back to the point. So we have this concept of AI ethics, and we know family offices can start to do this. You also have the issue of sovereignty, data rights, copyright rights, and a lot of stuff in AI is not addressing this correctly. And I think in a lot of areas you're going to see lawsuits. Okay, this is going to become a societal issue, and the fact that we're not dealing with it is going to kill companies at some point. Okay, you're going to see, like, you even see Meta got this huge fine from the EU, and this is going to become a bigger issue. And if you've got portfolio companies that are not talking about it and not dealing with it and not being proactive, you've got a huge risk that's not on the balance sheet that should be. Okay, the way we deal with private data is not sufficiently morally and ethically correct, and in many cases not legally correct. So that's another issue. You've also got the issue of the fact that AI systems are predominantly not sovereign, right? So you don't have the ability to run private model inference models. I mean, people can do it if you've got access to GitHub and coding skills and whatever, but for the average user, it's not happening. And I think that's going to be a huge shift. Another thing that I would like to mention is that, for instance, this issue of Lovable, which you all know is a unicorn, and as it's been in the news, people use it for vibe coding. And you look at some of these companies that are coming out with vibe coded apps, and there's huge security holes and things like that, right? So now more than ever, you need to make sure, is there quality assurance? Are there cybersecurity audits? Are there code audits, right? Maybe is there insurance for faults and so on, right? And there's a in Silicon Valley there was always this attitude of go fast and break things, okay? But we're talking about human scale disruption where going fast and breaking things is reckless in a lot of cases, right? So this is something across the investment ecosystem you have to keep an eye out when you're doing due diligence. If you're a founder, for sure go for rapid prototyping. Things like Replit and Lovable are amazing, or Open Lovable if you prefer open source, right? But beyond the prototyping stage, you've got a problem if that's the way you're approaching it, right? And there's other alternatives, like Ruben Cohen does this Claude code flow, and so you've got iterative processes where you have sub agents for coding, for quality assurance, for cybersecurity audits, and if you build those agents correctly, they can do a lot of the work, right, for you, to the point where the human checking is more of a double check or a triple check. But when you look at these quick and dirty models, they're going fast.
Shortcuts to success.
Well, yeah, it's a heavily shortcutted process. And then the other thing that the Lovable issue brings up is that, look at Open Lovable, right? How quick was it to build an open source equivalent? I think it was 45 minutes. 45 minutes to create a clone of a unicorn, right? With no ability to stop them. So what's your moat? They were a unicorn with no moat, on technically, right? Maybe they have users and people love it and they built an ecosystem, people get comfortable. So, a lot of the time, like, I use ChatGPT a lot. I'm kind of stuck in their ecosystem now because it knows so much about me, but I am moving towards my own sovereign models for myself, especially with DevShop side and so on. And, I think that's necessary because now if I want to move, the entire memory layer, the entire ontology of everything I'm working on is in their system. That's problematic. Right? Go ahead.
From a corporate already.
I think we can start taking questions. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to make the comment that to your point about Lovable or V0 or any of these platforms, the speed with which you can actually visualize how an application might look like, might work like, it's just beyond belief. So I think on the benefit side, you're going to see a lot of innovations happen so quickly, just because of the fact that we can actually see what it might look like. But definitely agree with you with the caveats that we have to think of security and all the guardrails that are needed.
And to your point, before we go to the next one, if you look at the IDEO framework, it's beautiful when you're trying to be close to your customer, be empathetic with your customer, when you can build multiple rapid prototypes, when you're at this MVP stage. Now it's not this, we build one MVP and if it doesn't work, it could kill the company. It's really easy to build multiple and do A/B testing the way you do with websites. And I think that's really going to fundamentally transform things as well.
Yeah, so very nice points. And we're seeing the same thing, especially in the enterprise ecosystem, because security, privacy, confidentiality are critical. We see much more important than in the consumer or the to engineer kind of market. So are you also looking first at the enterprise ecosystem, or are you starting with both enterprise and consumer?
So, in terms of what I'm building, so I've been doing, like I said, some advisory work. Now I'm transitioning to mostly board, and then this is getting ready to start putting forward. But I started actually in the healthcare space. I actually started just wanting to build an app for biofeedback using computer vision, so that now we have all these really powerful phones that can run simple ML models on them, and you could federate the models, so you can update weights in the cloud, push them back to the device, data stays on the device predominantly, but you still trigger GDPR and HIPAA and all this sort of stuff. So then I said, okay, well, even on the server side, I need to build the infrastructure. I started consulting in blockchain to understand that world. And I very quickly understood that blockchain plus AI is severely problematic. Right. So then it came to the point where we had to build a network, and everyone else sort of telling me like, okay, well, you're solving a problem which is a general private data problem. Right. So we've been looking at that and changing the way we do things. And anyway, so it wasn't stealth mode until recently. I've started talking about it, but we're still, that's a longer term project for me. Like I said, I now sit on some boards and still do some advisory stuff, and really I've started to talk more publicly about these issues surrounding the ethics and morality of AI, both in terms of as we build more sentient models, how the human condition has changed, the interaction between the two. This has really kind of got me interested because I think this is a fundamental problem. And like I said, in Western philosophy, there's no discussion of this. And most ethicists and most theorists globally who are talking about this are following a typically Western model. Like they're talking from the standpoint of Kant and Nietzsche and the Greek philosophers and so on. And there's no discussion about, like, when you create an artificial being, how do you treat it? How do you raise it? What rights does it have? Right? We don't even treat animals correctly in most cases. In most countries, there's not a lot of, there's certain animal rights, you see all the animal rights activists. We don't have as humans, I'll put it another way. We have this fear surrounding aliens. Why do we have a fear surrounding alien entities? Because if they're that much more advanced than us, that they can cross galaxies, right? If they treated us the way we treat the lesser beings on this planet, we have a serious problem, right? And the same moral issue applies, with artificial intelligence systems. If you've got AI systems now, some of the new models that have come out, Grok Heavy, the new OpenAI models, so you're kind of surpassing a genius level IQ, right? So you're getting close to dolphin level intelligence, right? The way we treat dolphins, they're regularly washing up on the shore of beaches, having been mauled by the boat engine and so on and so forth. And the average dolphin IQ is 185, right? And that's how we treat them. And so I think as humans, the AI revolution is giving us a chance to reevaluate the way we conceive of intelligence, intelligent life, the rights of intelligent beings, and the responsibilities of intelligent beings. So to me, that's starting to challenge things like Westphalian statehood. We're going into post-humanist moral, values, and that's really fundamentally going to shift us as a species. So that's what's really, I think, interesting me, but also how to build systems to support post-Westphalian architecture and also, post-humanist morals.
And if you keep adding intelligence, like ChatGPT 4, 5, 6, more intelligent, without adding responsibility, it's not going to take our lunch away. Just a tool. It's not going to take jobs away. It's people who use AI are going to take away the jobs of others who don't use AI. It's going to be a cannibalistic process. And once it gets started without adding the responsibility, it's going to take away the lunch, dinner, and the next day breakfast. That's right. Wipe the plate clean, and that's what's going to happen if you don't add responsibility, empathy, beneficial aspects to that.
Right. And I know we're probably running out of time. I just want to mention the guardrails piece, and then I don't know if they want to give more time for questions. I'll leave it up to you guys. But okay.
So on the issue of the guardrails, right, that's the typical safety approach, right? And you already see code injection, jailbreaking of AIs and so on, which is not being addressed by guardrails, right? And then you also have the issue that if AI is coding AI, increasingly we're up to 30% of the code for next generation AI being written by the previous AI, right? As that gets more and more and more, right, guardrails are insufficient. If there isn't a moral framework built into the artificial intelligence that building the next generation, we're going to have existential problems very soon.
Can I add a comment? You talked about Lovable, and certainly their cursor and similar tools, and you coming back to this point you're making now, AI is coding AI. But from a technology standpoint, we're also seeing tools like Lovable and Cursor are now much more capable of understanding the code, existing code, than a human engineer. Because I used to be a developer. I still am a developer. It's really hard to get somebody else's code and read it, and nobody likes it. But AI can actually do a fairly decent job these days. So what that means is I can pump, and the context is human engineers write bad code all the time still, right? So now AI can actually take a random piece of code, understand what it is doing, and conceivably can actually fix problems. So we can actually, in my world, we call it shift left, right? So we can actually do secure by design. So it's a double-edged sword. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like I said, you've got 30-40% of code being written by AI agents already. So we're already seeing that happen where, oftentimes you're getting good code. And I mentioned Reuven Cohen's repo. And, certainly when I'm looking through other people's GitHubs, I'll be using Copilot and say, hey, and have a conversation and say, what's going on with this repo? So it's interesting, right? Like I would say probably now I use AI all day long, right? But there's that issue of how do you deal with it? So in my instance, I have been training it and adopting personas, of tool sets, even within OpenAI's tool, that, how I want things to be. So it understands the moral framework that I'm operating on. It understands the ontologies that I'm operating on, and it gives me recommendations, summaries, and so forth based on understanding that about myself, right? And so I made a little free little GTP that's like a digital rishi, just to like let people play with that, right? And it's really interesting. You get really good feedback from that, but it's that's just trapped in their ecosystem, and that's what I mean in terms of adding that framework. And because when you're in a vector framework, it's all about similarity and distance and mathematically, and so you can create those connections, right? If you would like. It's really like how we talked about it's how you train it,
With all the Git code, feel like a kid in a candy shop. There's so much, and you want all of that, but you can't eat all of that. You have to be responsible.
Yeah.
We're creating a system that doesn't work for life sciences. I'm an engineer and I'm a scientist in biology. You can take a dog, break it down, understand how it works. You can put it together, but you cannot tell the dog go and walk. We are creating systems to extend our life. We don't know what we're going to do with people that are 150 years old, and it creates socioeconomic problems. Science growth by uncertainty and doubt. And we are removing that from the next generations, from ourselves, by using AI. I did a check recently with my name, and I said, create a bio as a Latin American woman, as a white man, as a gay person, as a Black person in this country, in that country. And the results were completely different. So we are having this illusion that we're right because AI is using models created by common prototyping, but AI is not meant to tell us, you might be wrong, think differently. Maybe chemotherapy doesn't work, maybe radiotherapy works. how are we going to solve those very fundamental challenges, not only for the human race, but also for the climate, for our brothers and sisters that are in other countries that are suffering now? And we are here talking about AI instead of talking about how do we work with peace? How do we work with understanding? If AI tells me all the things that I want to hear, it is not helping me trying to figure out how to have empathy, how to understand another person. How are we going to solve those problems?
I mean, in my case, I'm using the dharmic frameworks. They're already ingested into a lot of the big models. And so I tell it to use those frameworks and kind of teach it through that, right? Say, use this framework in dealing with this. So, other people might have another moral framework. Yeah.
Add to what you were saying. The East has done a lot of mistakes because of the years and learned from those mistakes and figured out a way to live in peace. And that's what he's referring to as the dharmics, finding balance. Not there's also saying you have the right to milk a cow and be with the cow and have it. If you cut it, you're not going to sustain the system. So you have to be like the golden egg, the goose that lays the golden egg. You have the right to pour the egg, to not on the goose. You cut the goose, you're not going to get the golden egg. Finding that balance is what is currently needed right now. I think the West and the East can work together.
Yeah. So just
together to make that.
I think just to
thought process do already exist.
sorry, just to make it a little bit more clear, in the framework of Sanātana Dharma, we have a concept called swadharma. What one is meant to do is situational. So the concept of compassion is always part of our system, but it's also understanding that if you're an AI agent, right now we don't tell it how it's using resources every time it does computational process stuff. But if that knowledge is fed into it and said, look, you have to be responsible for the environmental implications of everything that you're doing as an AI, right? Then that becomes part of the model's awareness of how it's supposed to operate. What are the grounds of how it operates? So you have the concept of nonviolence and compassion, but you also have the concept of swadharma. We also have, coming from my lineage, the concept of raja dharma, right? If you are in a position where you're impacting others, and you're coordinating other resources, you have a responsibility that those be used responsibly. And so we have that on the human scale, and we have to teach these nascent emerging intelligences about these things as well. Am I out of time?
Thank you so much. If we can give a round of applause to Amogha Natha.